All right, so I think it looks like we're recording already, so we'll get started. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, April 28th, 2020, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting virtually through Zoom. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Bondo?
Présente.
Mr. Burke? Ms. Figdor?
Here.
Ms. Morioni?
Here.
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Casiel-Reyes? Ms. Habib Saeed? Mr. Parrott? Ms. Yangala? And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. And just to let everyone know that Mr. Burke did tell me ahead of time that he had a conflict with work tonight, so he won't be joining us. So next, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have the flag screenshot, Superintendent? Perfect. I'll put it on, and then I'll get us started.
Janet will get it on in a second.
Even better. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Real quick, I'll go over the our meeting protocol as part of my remarks to the chair. So the procedures for our board meeting as we hold them through Zoom, all votes will be taken by a roll call. The committee members or the board members will use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, which can be found at the bottom of the participant screen in the sidebar or in the pull down menu by selecting on the three little dots on the participant video window, should they wish to address the committee. The chair will acknowledge the speaker, and the board members will lower their hands when they are finished speaking. Any opportunity for public comment will be announced, and members of the public will also use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. And this feature is either found on the webinar control bar at the bottom of the screen or can be found by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call the Zoom name of the public participant with their hand raised to address the board, and public members will have 3 minutes to address the board. Should the speaker need more than 3 minutes, I will address the speaker if additional time is needed and may grant them an additional 3 minutes. If additional time is granted, at the end of 6 minutes, the speaker's microphone will be muted. I don't have anything else prepared for my remarks tonight, other than to once again tell everyone how nice it is to see your faces, and to know that as a board that we are making an effort to continue to advance our work. In a few moments we'll have a committee updates, and I'll share a little bit of a meeting that we just had with our counterparts over at the city. So having said that, I'll pass it on. We were scheduled for a Casco Bay High School report, but Mr. Casiel-Reyes is not on right now, so we'll move on to the report of the superintendent. Mr. Botana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to note that Ms. Mangala did join us, so I did mark her as present. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland. We are honored to have their children among our students today. I would like to welcome everyone back from our April break. I hope that this was an opportunity to catch your breath and prepare for the next few weeks as we wind down this most exceptional school year. First thing tonight, I would like to take a moment to recognize LISEF Principal Lenore Williams, Anne-Marie Orth, our immersion coordinator, and our Director of World Language and English Language Learning, Carlos Gomez, and by extension, the entire LISEF community, staff, students, and families, because LISEF Elementary School has been recognized as the Elementary School of the Year by the Spanish Embassy in the United States. And I know from just looking at the attendee list that some of our amazing teachers and staff in the school district who are part of that amazing immersion program are in the audience. So when I said by extension, all of the entire community and staff, a special thank you to those folks who are here today, many of our Spanish immersion teachers at LISEF. The award is an acknowledgement of their efforts to implement a Spanish language immersion program. As someone who grew up speaking Spanish and struggling to first learn English and then keep my Spanish, I'm so in awe of the amazing work that's happening at LISEF. It's exhilarating for me to go into any of the immersion classes at LISEF and be able to engage in a Spanish conversation with students as young as kindergarten. Although I've been told by some of the students that my Spanish is not as good as their teachers. They make it look easy, but I know that it isn't, and we shouldn't take for granted the amazing work that has gone into making this young program an exemplary one that's deserving of this recognition. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Principal Williams, to Carlos and his team, to Grace Valenzuela, who's also with us, who started this program with former Superintendent Manny Koch, and of course, all of the fantastic teachers and students and the families that have trusted us to create this extraordinary program right here in Maine. We have the first group of graduates of the program that are moving on to the middle school for next year, and it's exciting to think about and see what's being planned for these students as they continue their quest towards full bilingualism. So congratulations, Principal Williams. I know that you've been a tireless worker and a great champion for this program. So I would love to cede the floor and let you say something if you want to. And I know you're shy, so you may not want to.
All right. Do you really want to unmute me? Thank you so much for having the opportunity to do this tonight and to see all the board members. I was telling Carlos today, we were actually engaged in some interviews with Spanish immersion teachers in Spain, and we talked about the very beginning of this program. I knew absolutely nothing about immersion education. I am not a Spanish speaker, and it was, to say the least, a daunting proposition when the then Superintendent Manny Koch and Grace Valenzuela walked into LISEF and said, "We think you could do this, and it should be here, and we know it'll be great." And after my mouth I pushed my jaw back up. I said, I think there's a lot to learn here, but it's been an incredible experience. I'm learning something new every year, every day, every moment. The team that we have right now is amazing. All but two of the teachers are from Spain through the visiting teacher program. They are hardworking, they are committed, they are dedicated, they care for their school community, they care for one another. And to be honest, I'm humbled and very proud to be a part of it. I really think it's been an absolute highlight to my professional career, other than working with Superintendent Javier Botana, of course. Thank you all. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenore. And Carlos, anything that you would like to add?
Sure, thank you. I think I just want to recognize really a couple of things. One is the amazing hard work, sweat, and tears of our world language teachers, immersion teachers, with 7 years of implementation, making adjustments all along with that vision always in our sights. All the heavy lifting by all of the teachers currently that are in the Spanish immersion program and the numerous teachers that have come before them, as well as the world language specialists. You mentioned Anne-Marie Orth, but prior to her, Becca Lynch-Nichols and Lynn Sullivan, and all the work that they did in the early stages and middle stages of this. Of course, Lenore's hard work as well, and the support of the Spanish Embassy and Manuel Collazo in particular has been super, super helpful. The other thing I also want to recognize is our community's commitment to world language instruction, and this is really students and families that have committed to this vision of cultural immersion, of language immersion. I, as a parent of a young child back in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, had a group of families. There were about 70 of us that were always looking for something like this, and we were able to help think about what this might look like. But really, it's the current Lyseth families that have embraced this, and thank you to the school board and the district that supports this idea of immersion and world language instruction, and all of the bonuses that go along with that early exposure to language instruction, the enhanced brain development, the greater cultural responsiveness, potentially increase in sealed biliteracy recipients, and multilingualism in general. These are all great fruits of a lot of hard labor, and I am proud to be a Portland resident, a parent, a former language teacher, and current director of the program. And just want to say that the hard work of all of our teachers is recognized at this moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Carlos and Lenore, for representing the rest of the team so incredibly well, and amazing job there. We will have a press release coming out on this later tonight, and I think it's important for everybody to know that there were 30 other schools that were competing for this award, so it is not something that is easy to attain, and so we're incredibly proud of your work. Next, I would like to introduce you to Andy Weissman Summer, the new executive director of the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. Andy comes to us from the Great Schools Partnership, where she was co-director of coaching. Prior to that, she worked as a bilingual immigration advocate at the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project, ILAP, for over 6 years. Andy's other career experience includes working as a teacher for 10 years in Maine, including doing her student teaching right here in the Portland Public Schools, something that I just learned yesterday, and also in Costa Rica and Peru. She's been a Portland resident for over 20 years, and her daughter has attended Portland Public Schools since kindergarten and is now a junior at Casco Bay High School. I'm excited to have Andy join the foundation. She has a strong understanding of the work that the district is doing. It will be a huge asset as we continue to tighten the alignment between the foundation and the district. And I don't know if Josh is here with us. I know that I had invited him. Do you know if he was coming, Andy?
I had thought so, but I don't see him.
Yeah, I'm seeing if he's in the, I don't see him over in the audience either. So anyway, Josh Rent, the foundation board chairman, is not with us, but I just want to also recognize the tremendous work that Josh and the entire Foundation for Portland Public Schools board has done working through this transition. Losing a executive director who is the founder of any organization is, a significant undertaking. And Josh, with the board, with Brenda Peluso, who was the interim executive director, have done a great job of holding the foundation's work and moving it forward while carrying out the search for the executive director. So I'm incredibly grateful and proud to be associated with the foundation, and would love to take the opportunity to let you hear a little bit from Andy and just take it from there. Andy?
Thanks, Javier. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here. I started 3 weeks ago, so as you can imagine, it's a little bit of an unusual time to be transitioning to a new job. But so in addition to getting up to speed with the people, the systems, and the history right away for the 4 priority areas I did for right now, those are, the food fund, which is with food learning, the families in crisis fund that we work on with Grace Valenzuela and her team from Multilingual and Multicultural. The new Books to Homes campaign that we're working on, starting consistently remote to provide them with engaging and culturally responsive books to be delivered to their homes. So I have jumped right into that as I'm learning people's names, and but I also wanted to share at Javier's suggestion just a few of my kind of bigger hopes for the work over the years to come, briefly, and then I'll wrap it up. So the most obvious one is to increase the fundraising capacity for the Portland schools, to be able to meet the expressed needs from you all, from building leaders, district leaders, teachers, and so on, and other opportunities for innovation and expanding to the Portland Promise. The second one is to continue the successful program of teacher grants. Last rate this year. The third is to build connections, partnership, relations, Portland families, local businesses, community groups, and potential donors to build investment in the schools, both financial and otherwise. And then some new ideas that I have been starting to think about with our board and with the stakeholders I've been talking to, is to really start to think about what it would look like to build an alumni network. Alumni, again, partial goal of financial support, but also action and build that. The foundation can play an increasing role in coordinating efforts around philanthropy, fundraising, donations to the whole district. So working with PTOs, principals, the school board, and others to be kind of like a central coordinator for that kind of work. And so we're developing a grant capacity to take on what goes beyond the local school budget in terms of innovation and new ideas. And then finally, just making sure that whatever we do, we keep students at the center. We can involve students more in the future. One of the ideas that I've floated in its infancy is that someday we grants or have students involved in things like participatory budgeting or other empowered and to lead their own work around the Portland Promise. So that's kind of the quick layout. And I'd be happy to take questions. Just want to put out to the board that I would love to have a chance to meet with any of you individually. If
Are you done, Andy? It seems like there's a lag. I don't know if others were experiencing that as well. So
right back to you, Javier. Thank you. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Then
Thank you for that, Andy, and welcome aboard. I'm looking forward to working with you, and it's really exciting to have you here. Tonight, our board focus on educational issues will center around changes to the continuity of instruction plan, including our pre-kindergarten programming, scheduling, grading, including modifications to high school capstones, and plans for end-of-year rituals. We'll also outline the proposal to end the student academic year on June 12th, basically by not making up snow days, and use the last 5 days for teacher development, reflection, and planning for next year. So we'll be doing that shortly. I want to recognize the work that our human resources, communications, and academics team have engaged in to launch our staff resource webpage, which we did this afternoon just shortly before this meeting. This new page incorporates all of our updated communication. It includes wellness and teaching resources and other helpful materials. And it's going to be accompanied by a weekly update document that provides consistent communication to all of our staff. I'd also like to recognize our SEL coaches, our social work team, and PA President Carrie Foster for their support and leadership in this effort. This web page is sort of the internal companion to our parent FAQ document, which we launched right before the break, which answers key questions that parents have asked us about remote learning. And I would very much like to thank Janet DeVias and Grace Valenzuela for their efforts to track all of those questions as they come in and to keep this document updated. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but it's really awesome and very thorough resource for families. I would like to inform everyone that working with Greater Portland Health, we have a plan to reopen the Portland High School-based health clinic in mid-May to provide well care services to students. These services, such as routine physicals, mental health support, contraception and nutrition education, routine dental services, among others, are generally accessible to all of our students at various school-based sites. They've largely had to take a back seat with the focus on treatment for COVID-19, but we're happy to be able to continue our collaboration with Greater Portland Health to make these services available again to our students. We'll provide updated information on when the clinic is opening, hours of operation, and how to access this service in the coming week. I would like to thank the United Way of Greater Portland for awarding us a $17,000 grant to support our families in crisis. You heard Andy talk about that as part of the different efforts that are in place in the foundation. And we were one of 31 community organizations that were selected for these grants in the first round of the recent grant-making effort in response to the coronavirus pandemic. The United Way is a huge asset to this community. Our staff, our entire Portland Schools family supports their work in many ways, and it's fabulous to see how this support comes back to us in this time of need, which is exactly the way that United Way is designed to work. I would also like to thank our food service team, which worked tirelessly through the April break to make sure that we would continue to provide food to our families. And I know that the board members know this, but I also want to inform the public that we've added Reiki as a meal distribution site, and we are soon adding another site in the East Bayside community to serve that community more effectively than we have to date. I would like to thank all of the staff that responded to our annual TNTP survey. I'm happy to announce that we had great participation response across the district, and all departments will have reports this year, which is the first time that we've been able to accomplish that. As a district, and the board knows this, we use the TNTP survey as a measure of our ability to meet our people goal of attracting, supporting, and retaining a talented and diverse workforce with a sense of collective efficacy. We will get our results before the end of the school year, and schools and departments will have an opportunity to reflect on the results as they engage in their improvement planning efforts. And of course, as we do every year, we will share those results with the board in the coming months. And I want to recognize again everybody that that completed the survey. We were, I will say, just a bit hesitant given the fact that we're in remote setting to, not sure what our response rate would look like, but Barb did a fabulous job of coordinating that, and so thank you, Barb, for your work on that. I would like to recognize outstanding Deering High School student Glynis O'Meara, who is one of only 6 students across Maine who were named as Presidential Scholar semifinalists. Glynis, who's been before the board in the past, since we recognized her recently as a National Merit Scholar semifinalist in the fall, is an amazing student. She's a powerful advocate for Deering High School on so many fronts, and so congratulations to Glynis. And tomorrow morning, Assistant Superintendent Millionelli, STEM Coordinator Brooke Teller, and I are scheduled to have our first meeting with leadership at the Northeastern University Root Center to discuss plans for supporting STEM instruction in PPS. And we're very much looking forward to growing a strong partnership with the Root Institute. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do you mind if I ask you a question about the health centers? Did you say that you'll have information by this week, or that they'll be open this week?
No, they'll be open. I think it's not done, but they're hoping to open on March 15th. So sometime next week, we hope to have information on their hours and how to access and things along those lines.
And do you envision them only being open through the rest of the school year or through the summer?
They'll be open through the summer.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. And maybe we can ask more questions when we get to the continuity plan educational focus. Next, for the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of March 31st, 2020. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, second by Mr. Atkinson. Are there any questions on the motion? Just a reminder, for questions and comments, we'll use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. So seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Wait a few moments to see if anyone. Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, we'll do this by roll call. Maybe Superintendent can help me with this, but please indicate whether you're in favor or opposed of approving the minutes of the meeting of March 31st, 2020.
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Balfons?
Yes.
Ms. Bondo, I heard you say yes.
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Morioni?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Mangala?
Yes.
Sorry, Ms. Yangala. I
Thank
don't know what I was thinking. Sorry. Chair Rodriguez?
Yes. And so that's unanimous with both of our students present voting with the majority. Next, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of April 7th, 2020. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Ms. Morioni. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, by roll call, please indicate whether you're in favor or opposed to approving the minutes of the meeting of April 20th, 2020.
Mr. Atkinson,
Yes.
Mr. Balfont,
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Ms. Morioni,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala, and Chair Rodriguez.
Yes. And so that's unanimous with both of our students voting with the majority. Next, we're doing the report of the committees, and so I understand that none of our committee work except for finance has continued taking place. So I don't know if Mr. Trevorrow, if you want to update us on finance, and maybe include our conversation with the city.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. So the Finance Committee met on April 16th. And in that meeting, we went over year-to-date budget actuals. We went over the costs versus savings of pandemic-related financial issues. And we had a budget discussion where we kind of reviewed what we had looked at the previous Finance Committee meeting, which was budget scenarios in which we would be facing, or in which we were proposing a 0% tax increase budget versus going with what we have in place today for a budget. So if we had to work within the budget that we had, and what we would be facing for a gap in each of those scenarios. We started to talk about strategy around budget. However, we kind of agreed that it was still a little early and a lot still unknown to be able to talk about that aspect of the budget. But just today, Chair Rodriguez and Javier and Miranda and I met with our counterparts at the city, and we're going to be kind of launching back into a budget process now. That budget timeline has us getting the budget to the council by June 1st. So we'll be having kind of a busy May. And the Finance Committee has its first meeting, or its next meeting, on May 7th. And in that, we're going to kind of look at a new proposal from the superintendent with regard to a budget. And then we have a joint Finance Committee meeting on May 14th, so a week later, and we'll be able to update the council on what we are discussing and get feedback from them on that. I think that covers everything. I don't know, Roberto, if you had anything to add regarding our meeting today.
No, I think that was a really good summary, and I appreciate it. And I think it's a good reminder for not only the board, but for the public that work has been restarted, and that we're working very closely with our counterparts in the city. Not just because that was our intent all along, but because under the current circumstances and the significant amount of uncertainty around our budget items, that having these ongoing conversations with them is just incredibly helpful, and couldn't be happier to have their support and their availability as we discuss these things. We have had also DABC, the District Advisory Building Committee meetings. So Ms. Thompson can report on that right now. Let me unmute you. I'll find you first.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, there you go. You're muted.
There I am. No, I just wanted to briefly say that we had a virtual building level advisory committee meeting on the 22nd. We went from 6 to 8:15, and we met with the Reiki group, as well as Longfellow and God, why am I having a brain freeze here?
Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. All of the appointed members were in attendance with the exception of one at one school, and we had a lot of great questions. We went over where we are to date, where we're going, how we were going to do community forums, get some suggestions from all of the members, and we are going to have a chair excuse me, BLAC meeting coming up. I'm not sure we've set the date for that yet, but that's to come from Steve Stilfen and Harriman. But I want to thank our co-chairs from the board here, Emily, Roberto, and Marnie for being on there as well as the city councilors. And we had some public on the call as well. So that was great. And then we're going to meet at this time virtually for the BLAC's stagged time-wise on the fourth Thursday of every month. At this time, DABC is not meeting until we have some more information to go from there. But the BLACs will be kicking into gear. And there is a PowerPoint that we covered the other night that is posted, I believe, to the website at this time. If not, we'll get that sent out to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for the update. And so, like I said, I don't think any of the other committees have been meeting, so there shouldn't be any other reports. I did want to add that the Family Partnership Advisory Committee met on Monday morning. A reminder that this is a committee that involves parents from our different schools, buildings, administrators, and school staff. And we had actually a really, and the superintendent was in this meeting as well, we had a really good conversation about an upcoming Parent University event. It's going to be held, I think it's scheduled for May 6th.
May 6th.
May 6th. It's scheduled for May 6th. It's going to be done virtually through Zoom. And it's going to be like a town hall fishbowl meeting. The focus initially was the intent of it was to have a conversation about the social emotional learning and that level of need to our students and conversations with parents and community members. But I think we discussed potentially having other options of topics in that same setting, if not at that one meeting, maybe separately, and obviously doing something. It was discussed that it'd be really helpful to do something separate for families who are non-English speakers, because having interpreters in a Zoom meeting could be really challenging. So having a separate fishbowl or town hall meeting of that sort to discuss these issues with our non-English speaking families. So we're all engaged in those conversations and trying to figure out the logistics behind that. But again, on May 6th, I don't have the time in front of me, Superintendent. Maybe you off the top of your head.
I know that we had a significant, I don't want to say debate, but we did go back and forth on that. And I don't remember if we wound up keeping it at 5 or moving it to 6. Grace, can you help us with that?
Sorry, we have not landed on the exact times, so we were debating on 5 or 6:30, and I have given Ramadan. I have to consult with our Muslim parents, community specialists to help us in making a decision of what is a better time, given that it is Ramadan and they usually break their fast at the end of the day.
Thank you, Grace.
Thanks, Grace.
So I see we have a couple of hands raised. I'll go to Marnie in a moment, but Ms. Figdor asked me to explain what a fishbowl conversation is. So fishbowl conversation, it's if you imagine a fishbowl where you have people on the outside looking in who are not engaging in the waters. So it's people that are inside of the fishbowl that are having a conversation, and then a group of people on the outside that are just listening in without necessarily actively engaging, so that they're just really active listeners. And then the intent in most of these fishbowl conversations is that afterwards it gets switched around, so the people that were initially having the conversation get to be on the outside listening. And so it's just a way to have dialogue. And this takes place often in Casco Bay High School, for example. They have these pretty often when they have some hot topics that they want to discuss, and the students engage in these fishbowl conversations. I probably didn't do it justice in that quick little summary, but that's kind of the gist of it. I don't know if there's a better way of breaking that down than what I just did. Was that decent? Like C+, B-? Good. Ms. Morioni, you had a question. I will mute you.
Thank you. I was just communicating with Ms. Thompson, and we're trying to remember the date, and maybe the superintendent knows this. During our BLAC meeting for the 3 schools, there was discussion of an upcoming forum for the community to participate in. And I believe for some reason, I want to say it was May 7th. It's coming up fairly quickly. And I just wanted to know if, I don't know if Steve Stilfon's on the call or.
No, I've got it here. It's at 5 p.m. on May 6th. So it's at the same time as we could potentially be doing the parent university that we were just discussing.
So that date may change for the BLAC forum, or that's going to say?
I don't. I just got the invitation now. I wasn't at the meeting last week, so I didn't know about the overlap. I think we need to weigh the pros and cons of that and try to figure out what makes the most sense.
Okay.
But I do appreciate you pointing that out, because obviously I just got the invitation to the public forum just minutes before the meeting, and that's why I was able to look at this and see that that's the time, but I didn't know about it before that. So.
Yeah, it's coming up super fast, and I'm kind of thinking that potentially maybe Harriman could look at a future date, only to make sure our community gets the news about it in enough time. Thank you.
Ms. Victor, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? I accidentally lower your hand. No? Okay.
Sorry, I was just wanting to note the May 6th date for the community forums for the school renovations.
I see. Perfect. Good. So is there any other committee and or member concerns? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our consent items. Will the superintendent please list or read the list of donations made to the district?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district, and as required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledging and expressing our heartfelt gratitude, as well as for their tax purposes. And so I would like to thank the generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. And the beneficiaries and contributors are, as you heard earlier, we have formally received a $17,000 grant from the United Way for supporting our families in crisis fund. We also received notice from Maine Craft Distillery that they are donating $2,000 to the Families in Crisis Fund at the foundation. And the district received funding to be used toward meal programs in response to immediate needs of families impacted by COVID-19 from the Sam Cohen Foundation in Portland. And of course, we're very grateful to all of these organizations for their generous support and contributions to the work of the Portland schools.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Superintendent. Next, we'll have our board. Am I unmuted? Yeah, sorry. We'll have the board focus on educational issues. We're doing an update on the continuity of instruction during the remote learning period. Superintendent, are you setting us up for this?
Yes. Today we're going to update you on the work that we've been doing since we decided to close school beginning on March 16th. On March 17th, you approved our remote learning plan. And then at our March 31st meeting, we updated you on the changes to the plan. And we committed to continue to work on these issues that were identified to end since that time. On April 8th, along with every other school district in the state, we formally extended remote learning through the end of the year in response to the recommendation from the Maine Department of Education. As we had mentioned at our April 7th meeting, if remote learning was extended beyond the original May 1st date, we would be coming back to you with additional updates on a number of issues, and that is what we will be doing tonight. Our goal is to provide an update on the implementation of our remote learning plans and talk about updates to the plan through the end of the year. While these are very substantive updates, we will continue to revise and refine as we go along, as we learn from our successes and from our challenges. Our focus tonight is on several areas: the restart of our pre-kindergarten programming, which had initially been closed during remote learning, a shift in grading conventions for the third trimester and fourth quarter, a shift in senior capstone procedures, changes in scheduling, including a consistent and structured approach for providing weekly opportunities for teachers to provide feedback and structured student supports, and an opportunity for students to catch up on assignments and for teachers to do collaborative planning and catch-up work, plans for transitioning to more targeted and differentiated support for students who are not yet meeting standards effective June 1st, and finally a proposal to end the academic year for students on June 12th rather than make up all of the snow days from this year. That time would be devoted to internal work with teachers in closing out remote learning and preparing for next year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendents Malia Nally and Aaron Townsend to walk you through each of these proposals, and I'll join them also to walk through the calendar change proposal. So Malia and Aaron.
Great, thank you. Can you confirm that you can see the PowerPoint? Great. So I want to just, sorry guys. There we go. I want to start by just regrounding everyone in the goals that we shared last time we provided an update on remote learning. This is just to make this explicit. We realized in our first iteration that we were not explicit about what we were trying to accomplish, and so in our revision 2, this was included. And these goals remain the same as we plan for this period of extended remote learning. And so once again, our first goal is to really focus on maintaining a sense of connectedness with a caring adult. That's our primary focus and where we are putting a lot of time and energy. We want to make sure that our approach to this is supportive of teachers, acknowledging that this is an incredibly challenging task that everyone's being asked to do, to learn a new way of delivering instruction while they are doing it, and while having to manage other kind of personal things at home and work at the same time. Our third goal is to maintain and deepen mastery of standards already taught and introduce new learning only when teachers believe students are demonstrating readiness to integrate it. So this acknowledges that there's a likely adjustment in the pace of our new learning given the context that we find ourselves in. And then finally, our focus is on mitigating the widening of the achievement gap that we know will result from an even more pronounced gap, opportunity gap in this remote learning context. And that fourth goal is what's tied to several of the updates that we plan to share with you this evening. So the first update is around pre-kindergarten. Up until this point, we've formally said that the pre-kindergarten is closed. It's not required by the state, and we acknowledge the challenges with delivering pre-K instruction in a remote context. With that being said, our pre-K team and teachers have been working extremely hard to do a lot of things to engage with students and families up until this point on an optional basis. Our teachers have been creating websites that include resources for parents to use with their students. They have been doing check-ins and ensuring that at the very least the basic needs of the students in their program are being met. And there's been efforts to ensure that students receiving CDS services are able to get those by coordinating work with our IT team to ensure that all those students with CDS service have access to technology and devices. So those things have been happening up until this point, even though our formal stance has been that pre-K has been closed. Now that we're looking to this extension of remote learning through the end of the year, we're pivoting our stance a little bit and formalizing the expectation that these things are happening across the board and consistently in all of our classrooms. And so specifically, that just means that our teachers will just continue to make these resources and activities available to students and families through the various online platforms that exist. In addition to that, we're creating pre-K activity and parent engagement packets, then those will be made available at the distribution sites. Those are acknowledging both the fact that doing developmentally appropriate instruction all virtually is tricky, but also in recognition of the fact that we do not have the capacity to provide devices for all of our pre-K students who don't have devices. And so this is trying to make sure that there are options for families who don't have devices and want their students to continue engaging in pre-K learning during this extended period of time. Our teachers will continue to do the outreach and connection with students and families. Our DLL teacher is collaborating to meet the student needs of our DLL, which is our dual language students. An example that Sue has shared, and I believe she's on the call here as well, is efforts to translate some of the read alouds that are being made accessible on the websites that the teachers are providing. And then finally, in collaboration with our IT team, if we are able to get more devices further down the line, we would then look at whether or not it's possible to make more of those available to students in pre-K who don't have a device in the home and want to be able to access more of the online opportunities and programs that the teachers are putting out there. So that's the update in terms of pre-K. Schedule is the next shift that we are looking at as we move into this extended period of time. And this is very much tied to our equity goal and that fourth focus on mitigating the gap. We have been asking ourselves, how do we prioritize meeting the needs of students with the least access to the kinds of resources and learning environments that make it easiest to engage in this kind of remote learning context? And that's led us to make these two adjustments, which you see here. The first is that starting this week, the week after break, all of our schools adapted their schedules to provide 4 days of class instruction and then 1 day of what we're calling targeted support. And so basically what this means is that on a fifth day of the week, our teachers would not be introducing any new learning or lessons, and that this would be time for all students to do catch-up and revision work, and that it's especially devoted time for our teachers to do targeted support and outreach for students who are most disengaged and furthest behind. Our teachers have been doing that all along, and that will still continue to occur throughout the course of the week, but this is acknowledging that that takes time, it takes planning, it takes collaboration, and so it's intentionally baking that structure into the flow of the week in order to really prioritize meeting the needs of these students. I think at the same time, like I mentioned, this additional day is going to be helpful for all students. The pace of work completion and learning is really varied in this context. As it is for families, we get a lot of different feedback from families about it being too much, not enough, different things like that. But I think by and large, our principals are reporting that the family feedback on this flexibility has been much appreciated. And so that fifth day for high schools is on Wednesday, and it's going to be Fridays for elementary and middle schools. And then the second schedule adaptation that we're making in service of our equity goal and creating time and space for our educators to really focus on students needing what we consider tier 2 and 3 supports is that we're ending regular instruction on May 29th and devoting the first 2 weeks of June to these targeted catch-up supports. And so this is like a summer school, but we'll have all of our educators on deck to be planning and supporting students during this time. This is not going to be the introduction of new units and lessons, but it's rather going to be looking at which students are furthest behind, which standards are most essential to be ready for the next grade, and who's not mastered those, and how do we go back and provide additional support and reteach to students to try to help close that gap. The design for this 2 weeks is still in development, so we don't have that completely fleshed out, but we absolutely have models from years past in terms of what you might have heard of as Sun School, when we've extended school for a couple weeks to work on targeted standards with targeted students. And we're looking at some of the models we've used in terms of our elementary summer school programs in the past to figure out what's applicable. But it's not so much a big new program as it is, again, time and space for our teachers to focus on a smaller group of students to make sure that they're able to provide additional support for them to do some catching up and closing of the gap. The next shift that is a part of the updated extended remote learning plan is around grading, and Erin Townsend is going to speak to this piece.
Thanks, Malia. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening now. So in addition to the changes Malia's described, the extension of remote learning has forced us to confront how we'll handle grading and reporting of student performance during this period of the extended remote learning. It coincides actually almost exactly with the third trimester for our elementary schools, middle schools in Casco, and essentially for the fourth quarter for Deering and Portland High. So, given this extension and kind of the experience we had over the prior 4 weeks of when we were initially in remote learning, we have made the decision to move forward with some grading changes, which I'll describe. And I think the premise, as Malia kind of noted, is that one from really driven by both an equity perspective primarily, as well as a teacher support perspective, and kind of a couple of principles that kind of were foundational for part of our thinking here was, one, recognizing that the stress that students are experiencing and the adults are experiencing, has a negative effect on performance. People aren't able to perform at their optimum selves, given the level of stress people are carrying. As we named earlier and named in our equity goal, that the school closures are more likely to reflect racial, economic, and resource differences for students, and thus disadvantaging students who, through no fault of their own, are already working to overcome systemic barriers to their success. And then as well, recognizing, in our teacher support goal, the teachers have been asked to make an incredible transition from in-person instruction to remote learning, and that an expectation to make fine-tuned judgments about student performance, about a range of standards for which they had anticipated teaching but may not be teaching, was not realistic. So, based on feedback from students and staff, the superintendent and Grace had a focus group with a number of high school student leaders, reviewing input from national experts and kind of monitoring what's happening with area schools. I and our high school principals participate in a weekly Cumberland, New York County, really, high school principal check-in about how people are managing this. We've made these decisions around our grading practices, and I think at Portland High they've developed kind of 3 core values around how to approach grading that I think reflect the spirit of what we're trying to go after here as a system, which is simplify, show compassion, and be flexible. And so they've done a great job of fleshing that out in terms of how to help teachers position, to help students during this time. But the decisions that we've made that students and families can expect to see in year-end report cards is that students will be graded on a met, not yet basis for the fourth quarter or third trimester. And so this is reflective of our moves, in the spirit. So we, intentionally did not take a fully pass-fail, frame, because as has been, there's been a fair amount of discussion about in the media and schools and universities. But this, we feel like, more accurately reflects our work towards continuing to grow our proficiency practices, with an expectation that all learners will eventually get there given the right time and supports, i.e., some of the efforts that Malia was describing around schedule. So at our, so we spent lots of time with our principals trying to flesh this out, in terms of what would most accurately work and be the least disruptive transition. So at our K-8 schools in Casco Bay, for the fourth quarter or third trimester, students will see at the end of this reporting period a met or not yet reporting on their report card, and at Portland High and Deering, the language will be pass and insufficient evidence. And those differences just reflect the different stages of progress those schools have been making in our work towards the proficiency practices. Additionally, Casco Bay and the middle schools will only be giving a Howells grade if students have demonstrated each of those schools have done some modification of the Howells, which are the habits of work and learning, where students have exemplified that. But if there have been challenges, there won't be any negative reporting around Howells. And again, those schools are kind of our most advanced in terms of the development of that language. And how they've been using them in the schools previously. So we didn't want to force schools who were still working to develop, kind of their calibration and work around that into having to take on that work during this time period. So, so that is why only those schools will kind of be reporting on Howells grades. And again, it's intended to just be an affirmation for students who demonstrate the habits of work and learning to engage in remote learning. So for high school students, importantly, these quarter 4 and trimester 3 grades will not be included in their GPA calculations. So, each of our 3 high schools is different in terms of their schedule, and how students accumulate credits. Casco is a trimester. Deering is at the, has the 4 block schedule, so they earn within the course of the year. So there's different calculations about how they'll be accumulating credits, but this fourth quarter won't impact anybody negatively. It's kind of the spirit of this, again, showing compassion. And then finally, as it relates to kind of grading, this isn't a grading thing specifically, but we wanted to acknowledge it in here, is that one of our graduation requirements is the capstone, the senior capstone, and there are a set of criteria related to those. And so we have updated those, and I believe it's in your packet, to be able to allow principals to have some discretion in modifying those requirements so that this current remote learning context does not enable students to not complete that requirement. One of the primary ones is around presenting to an authentic audience, and obviously in this context there are numerous challenges to that. So we wanted to be supportive of the efforts many students have made to be able to acknowledge that and allow students to kind of pivot from their projects to do some kind of reflection and documentation, so that they can still fulfill the spirit of this, but recognize the limitations that remote learning places on us in fulfilling projects that students might have designed originally before this. So we didn't want that to be a barrier for graduation for students. So those are some of the updates around our grading practices that we've moved forward with. And then the next thing that I want to update, if you want to click me forward here, Leah, is around end-of-year rituals. And I think this one, is around how do we continue to honor our goal of connectedness during this period of remote learning. Sorry. There we go. So, we know that our end-of-year rituals and celebrations are some of, what ultimately becomes some of the most memorable moments and times for students and staff and families about their school experience. And often, as I experienced it as a student, as a teacher, as an administrator, those are those moments when after all the hard work has gone in all year, the ability to come together and celebrate kind of brings things together at the end of that journey. and feel like that's, those are super important things. So we're trying to really be deliberate about being able to maintain that sense of connection, given the circumstances that we have to kind of deal with. So, obviously one of the most important elements of end of year rituals are our high school graduations. I mean, that's the culmination of what we're working towards from pre-K onward. And so the first piece there is a plan to hold our high school graduations in the first week of August. The 3 high schools surveyed their seniors about the options around whether they would prefer moving forward with a virtual ceremony in June as had been planned, or whether if they would like to hold out to the end till later in the summer to hold out the option of being able to have some kind of in-person ceremony. And so it was over 80% at each of the schools, I think as high as 85% of the students responding indicated they would rather wait until later in the summer to give that opportunity. Now, and particularly given kind of the governor's announcements just today, we've been planning that even holding out to that date, there need to be kind of a plan A, B, C, and D about what that may look like at that time, because, as we know, this has been a rapid, continually evolving situation about what we will be allowed to do. So we very much appreciate our partners at Merrill Auditorium, who were very flexible with us and allowed us to move dates to early August. So that would be a plan A. Again, if we're unable to do that, we have plans B, C, and D, which D would be, having to resort to virtual, a virtual experience if there's no opportunity, if the restrictions on gatherings of 10 people or more, are still in place as they are now. So, we have plans for the potential of an outdoor ceremony, if that is, if we're able to do that and meet social distancing protocols, and even have been in conversations with some other more creative arrangements, with the drive-in to be able to maintain social distancing and still be able to kind of gather in some fashion. So we're trying to think creatively about how to make that happen to recognize that honor and milestone for students. Of course, that's not the only important year-end ritual that happens across our schools. So, we're having conversations with, our elementary and middle school colleagues as well about how to manage their activities. Again, with the continued evolution of the COVID pandemic and, kind of the questions that are emerging about what the beginning of school may look like. We recognize we're trying to find ways, and there are some really creative options that staff are starting to explore about how to be able to do some of that celebration and connectedness as communities, even through virtual options this spring. And there may be some instances where there are some kind of closure activities that happen at the beginning of next year as appropriate. For example, the 6th and 9th grade kind of step-up days. So as we plan towards the opening of school next year, we recognize those transitional events from students moving from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school. We've had a very successful historical experience of being able to help facilitate that transition at some level before students leave their prior school. That we're not able to do, during extended remote learning. So as we plan for the launch of school next year, that'll be a part of our planning about how to be able to support that transition for our incoming 6th graders and incoming 9th graders. So those are a few updates about how we're approaching the end of the year activities and managing that within our remote learning context. And so Malia is going to just touch back again briefly on our internal communications.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sensing that we want to wait to the end for questions, but I see Ms. Morioni had her hand raised. So I don't know if it was something that she wanted to add right at this point. If we don't mind going to her for a moment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's actually, I first want to say thank you so much, for the information about the end of the year. I know it's a moving target as to, what's going to be acceptable come first week of August for graduation. I've been getting contacted by various parents, and I just wanted to relay some of the information that they've been saying, particularly around Merrill Auditorium and the concern about with Merrill having only allotted a certain number of tickets per family to attend. So for two reasons. One is Merrill still even a good choice with or without, an opening of being able to have graduation, and possibly even considering more the cross insurance arena, where you could not only have more family members, but also, again, distancing, as well as thinking that possibly all teachers, all staff would want to attend as well, and just thinking of Merrill being a tighter space. So like I said, I've been contacted by several parents, and I just wanted to relay their concern around to move it completely out of Merrill regardless, and have it at a larger space. So I just wanted to, add that.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Morioni. Just to be clear, Merrill was the intended location prior to the pandemic for all the schools, so that, historically has been where Casco and Portland High have had their graduations, and Deering was shifting to that this year to be kind of in alignment, and for a variety of reasons. But we recognize the limitations of that. So we did roll over to secure those dates, but all of the limitations you're naming about the potential challenges, if we're able to gather in person because it's been so long, that there might be an outpouring of people wanting to gather, right? Recognize that those may be challenges. And so, yes, outdoor venues is part of Plan B, FITC, and memorials. Those are the Plan Bs that we're considering as well. So we have kind of a stage thing depending on what the restrictions will be, and we're trying to determine exactly when our kind of like decision date about making a call of what we're going to do is going to be. And certainly the governor's update today may push us in that direction some. So we'll continue communicating information as the situation evolves, and have kind of a clear end date so that everybody can plan on the event. I also want to and recognize Roberto, that Ms. Figdor had a question about one of the prior slides in the chat. So I don't know if you want to take that now.
Yeah, I think if it's okay, if we can. I know that there were some other questions from the first three items that we talked about. So Ms. Figdor, if you wanted to just verbally ask the questions that you proposed on the chat, so we can pause at this time. I think it'd be a good break for us to take.
Sure. My question was about the final 2 weeks of the school year. I'm wondering if students who are meeting or exceeding standards have school for those 2 weeks, or school effectively ends for them on May 29th. And then just on graduation, I really encourage us to consider outdoor venues.
I can speak to the first question. So we will provide optional activities and opportunities for students who are not required to get who don't need the additional targeted support around catch up on the standards. And so that will look a little bit different at the different grade spans. So for families who are thinking about planning during that time, if they want to provide those opportunities and have structure, there's going to be options for them, but it will not be tied to our expectations around grade level learning for this year. So it will be an optional opportunity for all students, and then some students will be asking specifically to engage in these 2 weeks of kind of summer school / sun school in an effort to support them with catching up.
And let me just add that those activities would be provided centrally. They would not be from the individual teacher.
Right. The central resources will happen for the elementary level, and then there's coordination more at the school level for secondary schools.
So can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please. I was going to follow up, but please do.
So will there be any interaction between the central coordinate, between teachers or staff and students who are meeting standards during that time, or there'll just be a set of a place where students can go to access some optional activities?
I would
just trying to get a feel more for what it might look like.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned when I was giving you guys an update here, this is not fully fleshed out yet in terms of its detailed design. So absolutely, our principals and teachers have been talking about what kind of ongoing connection might make sense. And so I think that there's ideas about that so that there's still some connection happening, but I think it would look different, and the specifics of how that would look different and vary potentially by grade span are not yet completely fleshed out, but we can provide updates as that evolves, and we're deep in the planning of it right now.
And it would be optional.
Correct.
So and I don't want to, how do you say, simplify this or make it so simple. In short, we could, and I get that this is not completely fleshed out, but in short, potentially some families can opt to make May 29th the final day of the school year if they feel like that their children have met the criteria and they don't want to go on to the next two weeks. Okay. And I guess as the details get worked out, I'm sure that we'll get updated and we'll get better information. But I mean, not that you're asking, but I like the way that it's coming together. I kind of like the thought process behind that, and my sense is that there's a number of families that would appreciate having the option, given the level of frustration that the current setup has brought to so many families, particularly the families that feel like their children have done somewhat well, or even the families whose children are really struggling. So Ms. Bondo had her hand raised, so let me unmute her. Let me unmute her. And unmute her. Oh, there you go. Ms. Bondo, go ahead.
Right, thank you. I have a question, just a clarification question for Aaron, for the seniors, I think, on the grading. Yes, because I just wonder about if some of the students didn't reach the 40 credits to graduate. So are they going to be considered to be on the catch-up support before the graduation, or what's going to happen?
Yeah, certainly the grading, the MET, would enable a student to earn their credits. So it would not disadvantage, this grading change wouldn't disadvantage a student from being able to obtain any credits. And again, just to the scheduling point, part of the opportunity of those 2 weeks is that, seniors may need to, be required to participate in those 2 weeks in June to ensure that they finish up any work to obtain the credits that they need to graduate. I mean, that was one. In addition, obviously, the student feedback was paramount in terms of pushing graduation back, but we felt like that was another opportunity in that, given the remote learning challenges, that it gives us a little bit more of a window to ensure we can support as many kids as possible to graduate.
Okay.
And I would just add that we're also exploring online credit recovery in the case that the 2 weeks of intensive makeup around missed standards isn't sufficient especially for our seniors.
Okay, right. That makes sense. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Morioni.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise this as an out of the box possibility, thinking of those 2 weeks, even the whole summer, particularly for our high schoolers, that possibly if there's a way to request if students want to, if they have met the standards, if they're interested at all in helping to tutor a student, or to help with food distribution, or to help with, all the needs in the community, but thinking of that as a time that our students could actually help in the community and think of it as a service learning opportunity for those to get more engaged with, again, either tutoring or, but I would love to see it as an offer to our students to stay engaged and because we need them in our, just an idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
great
great.
suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. So since we took a pause here or a break here, do we have any other questions on any of the items that we've covered already? The pre-K, the schedule, and the grading, and of course the end of year rituals. I had just a couple of real quick ones on the pre-K. I know that every meeting that we've had since we went to remote learning, we've asked, and I think I'll give him the credit for it. Mr. Berg has been really consistent in asking, what does it look like in terms of the numbers of students that we've not been able to reach? So I'm wondering, has there been any unique challenges in reaching to our pre-K students and their families? Given that the reaching out to them, it's more than likely directly through parents as opposed to, let's say, a middle schooler or a high schooler that might be more likely to get into their computer on their own.
Malia, do you want to answer that?
Well, I was going to ask if it's, I think Sue's here. I don't know if it's possible to unmute her.
It is.
I'm sure it is.
And is someone doing that?
I'm trying. I'm working on it.
I have yours doing it. Yeah.
I think I unmuted Sue.
Hey.
Sue, do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So, as Malia shared, the pre-K team has been really proactive in trying to reach every family, every student from the beginning of closure, meaning building closure and initial pre-K closure. I do think we have the same barriers that everyone would expect, which is we do have some pre-K families who don't have devices in their home, who are, parents are using their phones and their minutes to access things that teachers have been sending out. So that being said, I feel confident that we've been in touch with almost every family. We did have a couple of families who have moved since school closed. But the ability to connect regularly is not the same, especially for families for whom the pre-K student is the oldest child in the family. Because in other families with older siblings, there's a tech device that Portland has afforded to an older sibling. So there could be some sharing opportunity. That being said, I've been in communication quite regularly with the state director of public pre-K programs. And there is a recognition that trying to do remote learning with pre-K via devices is not developmentally appropriate, nor is it recommended. So our strategy has been much more to offer optional opportunities for families who want to engage and have the capacity to engage, both the technology and the time and the bandwidth, depending on how many other children they're trying to support with learning at home. And the effort to get more paper-based off-screen activities is both for those families who do not have devices, but also for families who just really don't want their young children on screens all day. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
No, absolutely. It adds a lot of important context to it. And I assumed what you said would be the answer, but I think it's important to put it out there and recognize. I think what you said there at the end, that developmentally speaking, that screen time might not be the most effective way to do it. So the other options that we're exploring. So thank you, Sue, for answering that.
You're welcome. And I just will shout out to the pre-K teachers because, of course, they are very aware of all of the pre-K students' developmental needs. So they've been trying really hard to be seen and present, even if it's a quick morning message or a quick song or something, so that 4-year-olds can understand that their teachers and beloved staff are okay and still out there in the universe, right?
That's great. That's really good to hear that. Then I think we answered the 29th question, grading question. I think that the rest of the things that I had noted came up in the discussion, what Ms. Morioni and what Ms. Victor brought up and Ms. Bondo. so we can move on. My battery's dying, so I gotta go get my charger real quick. But obviously, don't wait for me. I'll be back.
Okay. Great. So the next piece or the next update is around our internal communications, and the superintendent mentioned this in his opening remarks. But we, as he said, rolled out our 2 new structures today, a weekly all-staff bulletin and a staff resource website that's specific for this period of remote learning. And I think he alluded to this, but just to be explicit, the purpose of these communication structures are first just to make sure that we have strong regular communication during this period of time. Things are changing quickly. Our expectations are evolving pretty consistently, and the resources that we're developing in response to the evolving needs are kind of happening on a weekly basis. And we were finding that we needed some way to push out this information in a clear and consistent way as a district, so that people all had information at their fingertips. And that speaks to the second purpose of just consistency in the information and messages available. Carrie, the head of the teachers union, has been a great sounding board and advocate for making sure that we have stronger internal communication so that people are getting the same messages and information at the same time across the different schools. And so this is an effort to help try to improve in that regard. And then we also just see internal communications as a key lever for building strong internal staff culture, and how we think about this idea of collective efficacy where we're working toward a shared mission and goals. And so I'll show you here a couple highlights in a second where we're highlighting our own teachers' practice, but basically we think this can be a culture builder. And again, acknowledging the complexity and challenge that our educators are facing, we feel like it's important to kind of make these efforts to help people feel engaged and connected and supported throughout this period of time. And then finally, this is work we've wanted to take on long term. And so we're excited that this is presenting itself as an opportunity to launch what we hope will be a longer term internal communication strategy. And so we're kind of getting this neat opportunity for some research and innovation around how to do this more effectively. And that we think will serve as some foundational template for future communications. So I'm going to actually quickly show you all just a couple quick highlights. Still seeing my screen here? Thumbs up from someone. Thank you. And this is an internal site, and so that's why I'm screen sharing, but it wouldn't be something that is used externally. But this is the site. It's a Google site, and staff will land here. And as you can see, it's specific for this period of COVID-19, remote learning. And it's basically broken down into these categories of staff wellness and human resources, academics and remote learning, communication, IT, and then connections to our Portland Promise. One of the things to note about this is even though we have had this desire for longer term strength in internal communications, and we kind of saw those needs that I just described in the purposes, there was also several efforts happening all at once to try to get communications out to staff. So our social workers had come together with Barb and the HR team to start to build out what's now this piece at the top, which I'll show you around staff wellness. And they actually were the ones who started the creation of this website. That was happening while the academic team was also building out both Google Drives and Google Classrooms as ways of sharing resources. So our effort here was to bring these efforts together and turn into something more cohesive and intuitive for teachers and educators. So just a couple highlights here in the staff wellness and human resources. There's categories. The first one is around mental health resources. And so if you go here, there's just resources for our teachers and educators and all staff around stress and coping. There's mindfulness resources, things there that are unique and specific to the context we're in. Also down here, health and COVID-19, you'll click, and there's just information and updates around the health pieces that are relevant, talking to kids about COVID-19 and other information. Lots more in the HR and the staff wellness piece, but just going over to academics and remote learning. Here you'll see a featured highlight each week. So in this staff bulletin that goes out, each time we're going to have at least one featured highlight, which will be a video or artifact from a teacher's practice that we can highlight and share with people. And then that will get housed in this site as well over time. And then this is broken into resources for educators around connection, engagement, and social emotional learning, remote teaching, and then these teaching highlights. And so as teachers go into each of these areas, you can see that they can find resources that are, again, relevant and basically kind of called through and specific to the context that we're in. So here's our kind of short list, if you will, of best practices around connection engagement, social emotional learning, and other resources. We had two more quick highlights. Shared lessons and materials with teachers for pre-K through 5. And so all of those materials are housed here so teachers have quick, easy, intuitive access to finding them. And then finally, here's the last thing I wanted to highlight, which is are these PPS teacher highlights. And here's where we're going to share artifacts and best practices and videos from across our schools. These will be featured in the blast, and then they'll live in this teacher highlights section. This is like a little bit of a dream I've had since coming here, that we could lift up the amazing practices of our educators across the district. That was one of the first things I learned coming to Portland, is we have so many amazing people, but we don't have a systemic way to sort of spotlight, look at, learn from each other, at least across the entire system. And so this is us trying to start to dabble into doing that more effectively through this kind of a communication structure. So there's a lot more there, but we just wanted to share that with you. And again, we're really excited about this as kind of a new update to our approach to remote learning, but then also as sort of an opportunity for us to use this period of time to strengthen our approach to internal communications for the long term. So that's the update around internal communications. I think the superintendent is going to close out with the school year calendar updates, which lead into the discussion I think you all will have momentarily.
Javier, a couple of people have their hands raised. Does it make sense to go through those before we go to you? Perfect. Ms. Morioni, let me unmute you. Go for it.
Hi, I just wanted to say that is absolutely fabulous, Malia. So wonderful to see that. I'm just in awe of how much work. I mean, it takes a lot of work to manage and to put up information. Thank you, Barb, and to Malia and all the staff that have contributed to that. I think I love it, because I think you're right, over the years, that how to share what's going on well at one school or one teacher's classroom. This is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you. I just want to say thank you. Looks really great.
Thank you, Marnie. And I just want to acknowledge Grace and Tristan on our communications team. We're huge here, as well as Barb, and then the academic team and other members of all of our teams. But Molly Myers and Barrett Wilkinson in particular have been kind of spearheading the effort along with Barb and Grace and Tristan.
I hope it definitely continues, but thanks so much for all of you and your work, and to the staff that contributes to put their videos up there, to get their information out there. It's a whole collective effort, but it takes a lot of work, but I'm really impressed already. Thank you.
Yeah. And I do want to point out that while we were in that session, I did forward to you the newsletter that went out today, the staff newsletter, so you have access to that as well. Remember, Figdor asked for it, and I sent it to all of you guys.
Thank you very much.
And now Mr. Atkinson had a hand raised. I'll unmute him. Go for it.
Thanks. I largely wanted to say what Ms. Morioni just said and ask if we could get access. So sounds like both our asks been answered. So thank you all.
So if we don't have any other questions on what we just covered, we'll kick it back to Javier for the final part of the presentation, the school year calendar. You're muted. Sorry.
So thank you to Aaron and Malia for leading the work on all of these consistent updates that we've been making to our remote learning plan. It is a tremendous amount of work that has gone into the listening and thinking and articulating what our response is to all of that feedback that we've received. And, again, I don't think that we are done by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that this is a tremendous amount of work. And, the two of them have led our entire administrative team's work around, thinking about things like grading and scheduling and things like that. And that's a huge amount of work. And I'm very grateful to the two of them and our entire team for that work. The last thing that we are looking at today is changes to the school calendar. And this is actually an action item for the board in the new business section on the agenda. So we're gonna, quickly go through this, and then I'll have some introductory remarks formally as we deal with it. But what I just wanted to share with you is, the proposal that I'm asking you to consider is to have the school year for students formally end on June 12th. Normally, as you know, the approved calendar was for 176 days, and that was originally scheduled to end on June 11th, and then June 12th would have been the last day for staff. We had 5 snow days over the course of the year, so that would normally have extended the student year to June 18th. And we also had a couple of days when we shifted from traditional school to remote learning. We had a couple of days on March 16th and 17th that were days that students did not attend. If you recall, we made that quick transition, but we had 2 days. The state notified us shortly after we all moved into this that they would not be holding us accountable for the 175 days that are required by the state for schools. And so as long as the Board of Education approves any modifications to a calendar, there's no repercussions on the state side. So that's why this is a formal action, because it is required that you approve this for us to be able to move forward. And so in that context, what we're proposing is something that would amount to 170 days of instruction instead of the 176 that were originally scheduled for students. So the primary reason for this, if we can move to the next slide, is that we are obviously in need, in desperate need of being able to have focused and concerted time for our administration and staff to be able to work to prepare for the next school year. There are multiple ways that we are, envisioning school opening next year, and we have to plan for all of those. That's work that is beginning now. As I don't know if you saw what Governor Mills put out today, but she mentioned that they're bringing together a task force to give guidance on how to reopen schools. And so we know that there's multiple ways that range from reopening in remote learning to reopening, the way that we left off on on March 14th. And so there's lots of variation within, but we're working hard to think through what those requirements would be. And so we need some time for staff to be able to work together to operationalize those back to school protocols and understand what it would look like to return to school under normal school conditions with students that have missed out on significant learning, what it would look like to come back to school with social distancing built in, how we would address multiple aspects of cleaning schools and things along those lines. So I think that that's a major part of it, as well as developing those support strategies for students when they return to school and the transition back into to schooling that will be required under each of those different scenarios. We also have some potential professional development that we could do now and leave some of the time at the beginning of the year to be able to do some additional planning for the start of the school year. So those are, discussions that we're still having, but we would potentially devote some of the time during that week for that purpose. And of course, there's just, every year there's time that teachers, it's contractual to wrap up record keeping and preparing for the summer break, packing up rooms and doing all of those kinds of things that are built into contracts. And so that's what we would like to be able to do during that week. So I think it's important to point out that staff will work their contracted days in either scenario. So there's no, staff will continue to do the work. This gives us the opportunity to really do the planning and the strategy building around how to operationalize these things for next school year.
All right, thank you, Javier. Do we have any questions? Ms. Bondo's got, sorry, I didn't have that up. You're unmuted, Ms. Bondo, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have a question because when I look at what Maria and Aaron just present, then we have May 29, like we say, we don't add any more new instructions or lesson. And I look at that, we may end the school on June 12th. And when I look at the time frame for the 2 weeks catch up to support those students in need, I wonder if we have enough time. When we look at the way we're doing right now, the remotely learning, the complexity of the new system of learning, do we have enough time? Those 2 weeks is going to be enough to do a catch up for the student who really need to get more credit and more support?
So I'll take a first crack at that, and then, team, anybody who wants to join in on that. I think that there is no question that we will need more time and supports for some students than what those 2 weeks are going to afford, and more time than what 3 weeks would afford. So I do think that there's no doubt that some students will need additional supports, and those are also the things that we are looking at doing during that week, is planning what are some of those supports for students when we return to work. As Malia mentioned, we're also looking at summer supports around, traditional summer school is probably unlikely to happen, but can we do some form of remote online credit recovery and things along those lines? So we are looking to devote those 2 weeks for every student that has not yet met standards. So it basically is a 2-week summer school for those students. And, there's no question in my mind, and I don't know if anybody on the team would have a different opinion on this, but, that there will be students for whom the 2 weeks are not enough, and the 3 weeks would not be enough either.
Yeah, I would agree with what the superintendent shared, and both in terms of, no, it's not enough, and yet we are still looking at, some of these alternative summer options. And like he said, I think it's critical that our teachers have time to kind of come together and figure out, okay, given where we have landed the year, how do we set ourselves up for next year to understand where students are coming in, and to think really creatively about how we provide the right kind of differentiated support to help support students with catching up. This was a charge that we had prior to this period of time because, as you all know very well from looking at our data, we already have significant gaps in learning across our students. But yeah, so I do think the time for us to plan and prepare is really important, so that teachers aren't coming back with just those few days before summer trying to get all of their kind of work ramped up, and all of the reflection and planning that's needed to make sure we understand how to re-enter school and reintegrate in whatever format we have come the fall.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. So that's going to be my last question. When I look at what the teachers done, they have done a lot to try to get the students to go to the new system. I try to understand, to get more, what's the challenge they been see around this period of time, especially on the participation of the students to the remotely learning process that we're doing. Because when we look at if they don't participate enough or attended, the attendance is now really high to the level, to the extent of level. I keep worry about the catch-up support that we need for those 2 weeks. So what kind of challenge then we heard from our teachers and from the administration to try to reach our parents or to the participation of the student to the system, through the learning system we just get from during this pandemic right now? As the student being impacted to the learning process, I've been participating more often, or the attendance, because we don't know what's happening to the attendance. Are we working on those challenges around participation and attendance to the from the students?
Yeah, I mean, I can, or were you going to speak, Javier? I can.
No, I was going to say if you or Aaron, since you've been leading that.
Yeah, I can chime in, and then Aaron, you can kind of build on that. Yeah, I mean, we actually just today were in a meeting with our elementary school leaders, sharing practices around exactly what you're talking about. How are we systematically looking at not just attendance, but student engagement? Mm-hmm. And so every school has some system, some spreadsheet where they're looking at their students and they're trying to understand what they know about their engagement. So I'm picturing right now Reiki's system in my mind. And they have for every single grade level, every single student listed, and then an indication of what they know about if they're getting food, if they have technology, if they're completing work, participating, attending, etc. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking about both social emotional as well as the academic piece. And then they're color coding students to figure out, okay, who's kind of not really engaged, we're worried about, and then who are we super worried about because we aren't able to engage. And then they're tracking all of their kind of plans around, okay, what's the outreach? What's the next level of outreach? Did that happen? Did that help? What next? So that kind of process is looking slightly different in each school, but all sort of premises around the same big guiding principles. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the challenges, I mean, I think it's a range of things probably that you could sort of think of that are, that you would expect in terms of issues with technology, issues with language, issues with parents who just do not have the bandwidth for a whole host of reasons to be around to really support and facilitate the remote learning process. And so our team, along with the social workers, are trying to figure out, what can we do? And then, what can we capture and understand so that we're cognizant of where that student is at as we kind of come back together in the fall as well.
Okay, because I know we don't have any curriculum committee meetings. I wonder, because when you look at the engagement, participation, all those challenge around the student, so I try to see if the teacher will come up with a really clear benchmark how to assess those students before those 2 weeks catch-up support, because it's really short. So if we can come up with those clear benchmark, get a really sense what's going to have as assessment and strategy around that time of period. Can you be able to share that one with us, please?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that we do not have common, consistent assessment across all of our grade levels at this point in general. So generating and pushing out one kind of common diagnostic or end of year assessment is not really the strategy we're taking. However, we are, again, we were with our elementary leaders today talking about grading and how are we thinking about like how are principals stepping through, knowing which standards were taught, how they're collecting evidence to assess whether or not the standard was met in order to determine if the student's there. So in this case, I'm picturing Riverton, and Principal Ann Hanna shared her process where they already had their plan for which standards would be covered in this trimester. They then looked at those standards and whittled them down further to think about what's most essential, what's easiest to teach in a remote learning context, and which standards are easiest to gather evidence of mastery on in the context within which we find ourselves. And they're doing weekly grade level collaboration to figure out, okay, so what does this mean for our instruction or an assessment, and tracking that at the school level. So that's happening, but we don't have some sort of district-wide common assessment at this point that we would, implement in a few weeks.
I don't want to hold too much, but I have a clue because I have a lot of parents who really have the low-income families who really struggle with technology and those remotely learning process. They've been wondering what's going to happen with those students, because when you look at the catch-up support time, it's just 2 weeks. Can we think about they try to understand if those students will go to the next level grade if we go back to the school in September, or they're going to reduce their grade, because we know that people, the way we're doing is by the age. So what's going to happen, because we know the achievement gap going to be greater regardless, because the catch-up support time never going to be enough to try to help those students to boost the level.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we won't be retaining students in the same grade level. And so, but I hear you saying, and so then what, right? So knowing that the gaps are there, how are we planning for like we've said, our fourth goal, mitigating the gap. And that's why, we've implemented the 5th day, we're implementing the 2 weeks in June, we're continuing to look at what's possible in the summer. We're planning for how can we have an even more intentional integration of these additional support structures come the fall. And I know as we talk about budget, this comes up as well. So, we had several prioritized equity investments that were pulled off the table. And now there's, additional things that we see as a need. So, that's something I think as a group we'll have to be grappling with in terms of what can we prioritize given what we understand about the gap that was there and the gap that's been widened.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Javier, I had one quick question about the end of the school year calendar. So the state, or the state, the Department of Education waived the requirement for 175 days. Did they give us a number? So I know that, no, right? Because it wasn't like a statewide end of school kind of guidance.
No.
Okay. And that, because that's only student days, not staff days, this does not affect our contracted days for our staff, correct?
That's correct. It does not. Everybody will work their contracted days.
Okay. And is there any other, I mean, you would have included it in your presentation, but is there any other aspect of having a reduced calendar that would affect us elsewhere, be it, and I can't even imagine how, but be it either financially or in any other way, I guess that the board would want to find out about?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's at one point we had, talked about possibly moving those days into the following school year and have a longer period of time before the beginning of the school year. We moved away from that for a variety of reasons, but that, for example, would have had financial implications as that money, didn't get spent this year, it got spent in the following year and things along those lines. But I don't think, obviously we've done all of the work around this, and I don't feel that there's anything else that will, that there's another impact of this.
Okay. Appreciate that. And I also, not a question, but a comment. I think a couple of things that have come up through our conversations today that I just really appreciate hearing is the collaboration between our teachers and your staff in vetting some of these proposals and ideas and working through the solutions. When Sue spoke about the pre-K teachers and the work that they've been doing, and Malia talked about how Carrie and the PEA have been involved in that. So all that, I mean, it's just over and over. We keep being reminded on the level of collaborative work that's taking place, and it really is remarkable, and it cannot be prouder to be part of the team and the way that everyone is just working together, and it seems so seamless. I can imagine that there's a lot of moments of probably wanting to bang your head against the wall, but it really does seem seamless from this end. And what you guys are bringing for the board to consider is, you can tell it's been vetted really clear, very well through all the important parties that are involved. So do we have any other questions? And I think that was the end of the presentation. If not, we'll move on. I don't see any questions right now.
Great.
All right, so, here we are. We're back. I'm pulling up my agenda. Give me a second. All right, so we don't have any old business or new business. Consideration and action to change the last day of student attendance for the 19 and 20 school year. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Ms. Thompson. Superintendent, do you need to speak anything else on this motion? Do you need to say anything else?
I don't. I'll obviously, if there are any other questions that any of the board members want to ask, or obviously we will, because it is an action item, there could potentially be questions from the audience, but otherwise I don't have anything other than we're obviously asking you to approve this calendar change.
Great. So are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on the motion? Now remind the folks who are attending our meeting as attendees to use the raise your hand feature on Zoom if you wanted to speak on the motion. I don't have it open, but are we taking any questions or comments from any other means, or is it only through Zoom? So we're not doing any of the Facebook or anything else? Okay. All right, so if there's any public comment, give them a second. All right, I see Jose Luis Mendoza. Let me unmute, allow to talk. Okay, Jose Luis, you are unmuted.
Hello, I want to, I hope this is the right time to speak about this, and I know that it may come perhaps a week late, but I wanted to discuss briefly some thoughts on the possibility, if not the certainty, of the cutting of the world language program in the elementary system.
This is
not now.
Not now. So what we're doing right now is taking public comment on the motion that we're considering to change the last day of the student.
I beg your pardon.
No, that's okay, Jose Luis. If you hang around at the end of our meeting, we'll have public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda, and we'll be getting there shortly because we only have one more thing on the agenda. And at that point, you can definitely speak to the topic.
Very well. Thank you.
So we'll wait just another moment and okay, seeing none. Is there any other board discussion? Okay, seeing none. We'll put it to a vote. We'll do this by roll call. Please indicate whether you are in favor or opposed of changing the last day of the student attendance for the 2019-2020 school year. Superintendent?
Mr. Atkinson,
Yes.
Mr. Balfont,
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Ms. Morioni,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow, I did not hear Ms. Trevorrow.
Sorry, yes.
Sorry. Ms. Brown
Yes.
and Ms. Yangala.
Yes.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Next, we have a first read. We have a first read to authorize the superintendent to, one, accept the bequest from the state of Philip B. Thompson Jr. of 2% of residuary estate to Portland High School. Two, authorize Drummond Woodson as board counsel to prepare a petition to Cumberland County Probate Court seeking approval to modify the terms of the bequest. And three, authorize the Foundation for Portland Public Schools to accept and hold the bequest on behalf of Portland Public Schools. And that'll come up on our next meeting. And next, given that it's before the hour of 10 p.m., it's 8:08 p.m. Is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Just a gentle reminder that if you are providing public comment, we ask you to use the raise your hand feature provided by Zoom. This feature is either found on the webinar control bar at the bottom of your screen or can be found by selecting your name on the participant screen. I will call the Zoom name on the public participant with their hand raised to address the school board, and public members will have 3 minutes to comment. And should the speaker near the 3-minute mark, I will address the speaker to see if additional time is needed and may grant an additional 3 minutes. If additional time is granted at the end of the 6 minutes, the speaker's microphone will be muted. I don't know if Mr. Mendoza is still around. Yep, there we go. All right, give me a second. I'll unmute you. Okay, and so at least you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Yes, thank you very much for your time, board. As I stated earlier, I just briefly wanted to give some thoughts and perhaps some perspective on the possibility, if not the certainty, of cutting world languages from the elementary schools. I am in my 11th year as a Spanish teacher. I grew up in Bolivia. I am a dual citizen of Spain and the United States. I have dedicated my life to language acquisition. I imagine that it's I'm certain, in fact, that the district values language acquisition, and that's been clear tonight. In this very meeting, there are several examples of that. Senora Botana, you made reference to it at the beginning of the meeting. I see a Puerto Rican flag proudly hanging. Carlos is not here, but I was fortunate enough to teach his son in Spain for a summer, Gabriel. So that's one example of, ahí estás, Carlos. That's one example, or many examples, I suppose, of how the district really does value language and cultural education. And secondly, of course, tonight we gave recognition, a very deserved recognition, to Lysith and the program that they have developed, that they have executed, and that will continue to carry on. And everyone here is very proud of that, and rightfully so. I'm very proud to be part of a district that has mounted such a project. And so what I would ask the board to consider is that we are true to what we said on paper. And if we do, in fact, want to be true to our promise and to our values and to our mission, on the very night that we recognize such an important achievement by LISIF, I hope that in the coming month, during the budget talks that Ms. Trevorrow mentioned that will be happening, that you do in fact reconsider the implications, not just the optics of cutting world languages from the elementary schools. But in fact, if we do remain true to our promise, remain true to our values, which we have demonstrated this evening, are in fact very important to us. So this is simply what I wanted to say. Thank you all for listening, and stay safe. Una cosita más. A todos los profesores del ISEF, a todos los directores, enhorabuena por un premio, por un reconocimiento muy, muy bien merecido. Enhorabuena, felicidades y nada.
Perfect timing. Well done, Mr. Mendoza. Thank you. I see Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Hutchins has his hand raised. Let me now and unmute. Ryan, go ahead. Oh.
All right. Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Thank you. So I think I'm going to ask for a 1 minute extension to begin with, because I've timed mine and it's 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So given that we get an extra 3 minute possibility, if granted, I would like to request that up front.
Perfect. Appreciate the proactiveness.
Great. Thank you. So good evening. My name is Ryan Hutchins. I'm a licensed parent, Lyman Moore Spanish teacher, and Deering wrestling coach. I want to start out by saying I understand the incredibly difficult times we are in, and the decisions in front of you will not be easy to make. I want to encapsulate as best I can how two parts of this district that are being considered for cuts are incredibly important to keeping the Portland promise for all our students and why they should be maintained. The first is the Elementary World Language Program that serves roughly 1,000 students per year in grades 4 and 5. It has been stated that there's an inconsistent or uncertain return on investment in what this program provides the students. I would argue that it may be hard to see because, and pardon my analogy as a coach, it is something that may not always show up on the stat sheet. It can be hard to appreciate the JV athlete because they are not the one hitting the game-winning shot, or the understudy in a play because they are not the ones under the lights on the stage. But where would the state champion or the lead in the play be without their dedicated teammates helping them prepare every day? They would probably not win their state championship or nail their lines on opening night. This is the much underrated and underappreciated value of introducing world language at the elementary level. As a Deering graduate who started with French in elementary school, which does show my age, so I apologize, I can first tell you firsthand that my early experience to language not only served to enhance my abilities in my other classes and help shape my academic and professional careers, as well as my appreciation of all cultures, just as it does with our students today. Since I only have a few minutes and someone has already said it better than me, I am going to email everyone on the board a short TED Talk video by teacher Ryan Sellers. The talk is geared towards Latin, but as someone who has taught both Spanish and Latin, and with 60 to 70% of English and 90% of Spanish coming from Latin, I can attest that this message very much applies to both. Quoting Kobe Bryant, who was fluent in Spanish, by the way, as his hook, he talks about the study of Latin helping all students learn the fundamentals of the game of a strong foundation in English, developing critical thinking skills, creating connections across cultures, and helping in career preparation. The synergy that language study provides with all classes serves to make our students better in all their academic endeavors and beyond. The second area, very briefly, is athletics and co-curriculars. In a time when too much is only available to those who can pay, school athletics and co-curriculars remain one of the last true community opportunities that everyone can access. As a coach for 19 years, I cannot tell you how many students walked across the stage as a high school graduate, in large part because athletics and co-curriculars were there for them throughout their education. Not only were they a hook to keep many marginalized students engaged and coming to school, but they served to teach lessons of commitment, perseverance, and teamwork, among countless other lessons to become stronger students and stronger all-around people. Cuts here would result in many opportunities being taken away from those who need it the most. Lastly, I want to leave a message geared towards our city as a whole. Far too often in education, valuable programs get cut and our students suffer for it. It is about time we as a society, and please let Portland be a leader, that we prioritize rather than marginalize education. To quote JFK Jr., our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. So please, to everyone listening, we need to invest in our children. Speak to your city councilors and fight for funding in the Portland Public Schools so that our children are ready to become strong adults who have the skills and ability to fight for and improve themselves, their families, our nation, and the world, which is exactly what we promised them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Exactly 4 minutes, brother. Well done. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Ooh, did I hear him? Okay, seeing no other public comment, excuse me.
Sorry, Roberto.
Dígame.
There's a student, Jossie, that would like to speak, but I think she's having trouble getting online.
Sure. Is Jessie connected somehow?
Jossie is she's one of the attendees.
I'm looking for the name.
I see Jossie Nasenga.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, she's not, the only way we can allow her to talk is promote her to panelists. So I don't exactly know why that is. Are we okay with promoting her to panelist?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I think Jossie, you might be in business.
Go for it. I think you're unmuted too. Go for it, Jossie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Jossie, and I just wanted to talk about the issue of cutting off the budget, because as an immigrant, I learned English, and that wasn't really one of my choices. I was forced to learn English, but I took Spanish, and I really loved that class. And I think learning a language of your choice gives you a freedom, and you really do enjoy learning about another culture. And I think as a person that speaks both French and English and has learned some Spanish, I've compared myself to my peers and realized that I have a deep understanding of others' culture, which makes me more open to other people. And I think learning a language is just not like learning the language, it's learning the culture and learning to accept people, and cutting off, that opportunity for children. I don't think that's a good idea, because it takes off the ability to understand other people from another culture. So that's what I wanted to talk about with the school board.
Thank you, Jossie.
Thank you.
So now, if there are no other public or members of the public that want to address the board, we will close the public comment section, and we'll ask for a motion to adjourn the business meeting. With Ms. Thompson, second by Ms. Bondo. All those in favor, please indicate. We'll do a roll call for this.
Mr. Atkinson.
Yes.
Mr. Balfons.
Yes.
Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Ms. Figdor,
Yes.
Ms. Morioni,
Yes.
Ms. Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Trevorrow,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Yangala. I don't see, oh no, she's still here. We'll skip her. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, that's unanimous. We've adjourned at 8:22 p.m. Thank you all. Again, really nice to see everyone. Great meeting, great discussion, and thank you, staff, for all the work you guys are doing. Have a good rest of your night.
All right, stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.